Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and then opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 1, Episode 16. Which Prue is it anyway? Episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. A Lord of War tries to regain his abilities that he had lost by being disgraced by targeting Prue because he needs the powers of a firstborn witch, and he chooses Prue specifically because an ancestor of the sisters, Brianna, who happened to have the same powers, Prue was the one who disgraced him, causing him to need to earn his abilities back in the first place. Not trusting the power of 3 originally, Prue decides to clone herself to increase her power by 3, and this results in 3 versions of herself, the original, a perky version, and a kind of vixen version. However, each of the clones ends up falling victim to Gabriel, and in the end, the power of 3 is what saves the day as the sisters do come together and defeat Gabriel by sending his sword back at him, resulting in him basically dying on his own sword. We also get a subplot of Andy because the clones were killed. But they didn't disappear right away because the purpose of them being created was still valid. He sees a dead Prue, but then when he goes to the house to inform Phoebe, finds an alive Prue, and alongside all of the other things that have happened, Andy has been, we find out at the end of the episode, keeping a file, getting closer to uncovering Prue's secret, and then a minor side plot of sorts. Not Prue, sorry. Piper's restaurant Quake is doing inventory in this episode and she's counting things on occasion. But that is what happens within this episode. So now that I've rewatched the episode, I'm now going to rank the episode on our 2 lists that we rank on in this channel. First is a mostly objective ranking, which is void of emotion, but bias and judgment can still apply. And then the personal ranking, which is entirely the emotional response to the episode. So with the mostly objective rank values for this episode, I've highlighted those that apply. There weren't any negative rank values that applied to this particular episode. On the positive side, we have our single episode supporting character introduction, which was the Lord of War, Gabriel Statler, who was our main villain of the episode, and he was worth 1 point. And then we have the second positive that applied, which was that there was multi-season main character development, and that is Phoebe dislikes being the only sister that doesn't have an active power, and she feels that that makes her vulnerable or weaker than her sisters, and has decided to take things into her own hands in order to become to be able to contribute better to the fighting of demons. She has decided to take up martial arts and self-defense courses and has gotten a dummy to help her practice, which is a good thing because the dummy ends up stabbed instead of any of them by the crystal sword held by Gabriel when he first breaks into the house and uses a smoke bomb, so all he sees is the human-like figure. Obviously, we know as rewatchers the future, and we know that Phoebe does, in fact, primarily fight with martial arts. Even when she does develop active powers in the future, she still defaults back to martial arts as her main mode of fighting demons, and is the sister who is the most athletically inclined in the future. So this is the first time that we're seeing that and the start of that journey and development of the character. which is why it is worth 4 points, bringing the total points for this episode to 5 out of 10. So, as a reminder of our season 1 rankings so far, our mostly objective ranking, in first place we have Something Wicked This Way Comes, I've Got You Under My Skin, From Fear to Eternity, Is There a Woogie in the House, Wicca Envy, Secrets and Guys, Dead Man Dating, Feats of Clay in 8th, 9th, Dream Sorcerer, The Witch is Back, Thank You for Not Morphing. This episode lands in 12th place with Which Prue Is It Anyway? The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and in last place currently is The Fourth Sister. So now we come to the personal ranking, and in the personal ranking, there are some things about the episode. One of the things about the episode was that I did find the concept of like these Lords of War very interesting. I feel like they do similar things with like Four Horsemen and other such beings in the future as well, and I do like it as a concept, and especially the fact that the Lords of War will basically start wars, and once the war has ravaged the area, they'll then basically reincarnate into a different part of the world where they can then start the process of beginning wars again. And the concept for this episode is that because they are meant to be inseparable from their sword and while united with their sword be invulnerable to the weapons of man, the loss of the sword is what disgraces them, and this is what Brianna did to Gabriel supposedly in the past, um, pre the current reincarnation, and that's why he needs to steal back his powers. It opens the episode with him stealing from a boxer his killer instinct, and this boxer supposedly killed his opponent in the ring 3 years previous. And then they also need the magic of the firstborn witch, and they target Prue because it was her ancestor that disgraced him. Even knowing that she was part of the Charmed Ones, which most of the big bads, because they were a prophesized development, have kind of not known that they were the Charmed Ones when they attacked, or were a bit more leery about attacking the Charmed Ones, you would think. But he wasn't. I do want to point out that the crystal sword was cool. I liked that prop. I would probably buy a replica of it because I thought it was super cool that it has a crystal blade instead of a metal one. It gives it a unique feature. I also enjoyed the doubles of Prue. As I mentioned in the summary, there were 3 distinct personalities for these dummies. Not dummies, sorry, clones. I was thinking about the martial arts dummy. So, 3 clones. The pink one is the perky one because they color code with sweaters. The blue one is the vixen one, and then the third one is the original Prue and she just wears black. Obviously, the perky one dies first after causing some trouble for Prue in the workplace. We then have obviously the original Prue surviving it all. The vixen Prue, Piper and her do not get along at all. She's sent to Quake with Piper while the other 2 go to Buckland's. And she essentially goes into the kitchen and eats pasta in a particularly intimate way. And the chefs very much enjoy that, and Piper very much does not. And she basically accuses this Prue of not being Prue because Prue doesn't act like that. But the vixen Prue basically says that it's a part of her that never gets to go out and is the opposite to the regular Prue's day-to-day corporate persona. It's also interesting how Prue then feels each death of her clones as if it was happening to herself, which is a good plot point because that's how they know when the other clones had died. And then there's a scene, of course, where there's now three Prus. They're clogging the bathrooms. They used up all the hot water. Piper, I understand, being upset. She has to go to Quake. She has to do the inventory, and she's going with one of the clones. But Phoebe also gets upset by this. And I'm just sitting there like, you're unemployed. You're not going to Bucklands. You're not going to Quake. You could just sit around for like a couple of hours for the hot water to like reheat, to refill, and then have your shower. So I feel like every time Phoebe's upset about the hot water, I'm like, you're unemployed. You're not doing anything. Just wait a couple hours, let it refill. You can have your shower then. Like, there's nothing that says you have to have your shower right when your sisters are because they have to go to work. You don't. I just want to point that out that I think that's weird. And it's a choice that they made that does not make sense. I also found in this episode that, well, actually, as I was watching the episode, I took a note. And I took a note that said that Andy has been subjected to emotional cruelty. And I stand by this. Andy obviously still has fond feelings for Prue, even though they are just friends now. At the start of the episode, he brings tickets to a concert that they were going to go together back when they were still dating, which had finally arrived in the mail, and he gives these to the pink Prue, or Perky Prue. Perky Prue is the first one to die, so when she dies, obviously he identifies the body, he sees the tickets that he had given her, and he then goes to inform Phoebe, who basically, upon finding out that the sweater was pink, is relieved rather than sad, which of course disgusts Andy because he's like, I'm giving you the news that your sister is dead. Why are you not like bawling your eyes out? Why are you relieved? Obviously, something's going on. But that's, of course, when our Blue Prue, our Vixen Prue, walks in and greets Andy. And this, of course, then shocks him. But he still has an inkling that, like, something's not right here because he saw the body. And she, of course, assures him, look at me. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm fine. And then he basically, because he has that inkling that something's not quite right, he asks Prue about the tickets, and she knows about the existence of the tickets, that they had ordered them, that they would be coming, but she does not know that he had already given them to Pink Prue that morning, and therefore basically outs herself as someone different than who he had spoken to that morning. Which then leads him to go back to the coroner and be like, I have seen this person alive. They are also there. Fingerprints, DNA, like all the tests. And the coroner assures him that every forensic option available says that that clone is Prue. It is a clone. Even the fingerprints match down to the last whirl, which even in identical twins, fingerprints will be different. And so this meant that this should be Prue. At the end of the episode, Andy kind of arrives after they've defeated Gabriel, sorry, and she basically is asked to go with him somewhere. He wants to show her something. He takes her to the morgue where, now that Gabriel is dead and the purpose for which they were summoned is fulfilled, those clones have now disappeared, and so all that's left on the slab is basically the clothes that Perky Prue was wearing with the pink sweater, and she basically, is like, what do you want to show me? It's a sweater. Like, I don't know what's happening. And essentially tries to gaslight him into, having not believed his own eyes, that it was all in his head or anything like that. But then we get our final scene of the episode where he's got a file that has a lot of information about all the weird things that have been happening around the Hallowells and specifically Prue that he's been keeping track of. So he's obviously starting to come around to the ID, but whether he will get it right or not has yet to be determined within the series so far, which honestly was the most compelling part of the show. Like, I do enjoy the like clone drama and, all of that planning. I think that's fun. Gabriel was kind of, as a villain, I feel like he was more of a side note. I feel like it was more about Prue. And then also this Andy, like this mini Andy saga was very compelling to me. I'm like, ooh, what's he doing? What's he thinking? He's getting closer. Can't wait for him to find out. But Gabriel was kind of like, meh, nah. So overall, I liked the episode. I didn't love it. There's been better. There's been worse. I decided that it would be a 6 out of 10 from me for this episode. And so, with our season 1 rankings so far, as a reminder of our personal ranking, in first place we have Is There a Woogie in the House? Second, Dead Man Dating, The Witch is Back, From Fear to Eternity, Wicca Envy, The Truth is Out There and It Hurts, Something Wicca This Way Comes, Dream Sorcerer, Feats of Clay, Thank You for Not Morphing. This episode is in 11th on the personal ranking. Which Prue is it anyway? Then Secrets and Guys, I've Got You Under My Skin, The Wendigo, The Wedding from Hell, and in last place, The Fourth Sister. Which brings us to our final little segment of the video where we do our series ranking so far. The series ranking is of course going to rank each of the seasons against each other, and we do this by totaling up the number scores from each episode in order to find out the total for the season and then figuring out what percentage that is. And once we're done the series, we'll know which seasons are better and which ones could have done it with a little bit of work. And so, with the addition of 5 on the objective ranking, we are now up to 107 out of 220. And then with 6 on the personal side, we are now up to 104 out of 220 so far. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 1, Episode 16, Which Prue Is It Anyway? Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.